Maybe I'd like to start by just talking a little bit about the role that TFO Canada plays, and why we really are focused to some degree on the Canada-Africa agricultural trade networks, especially as it relates to how we can help small medium enterprise in African countries to access the Canadian market. A little bit about Trade Facilitation Office Canada, otherwise known as TFO Canada. We are a Canadian not-for-profit organization, often known as a non-government organization that has been in operation since 1980, and we're based in our nation's capital in Ottawa. Our statement of purpose, or as they say, our raison d'être, is to really improve lives through the creation of sustainable trade partnerships for exporters from developing countries with Canadian and foreign buyers. The beneficiaries, given that we've been around for over 41 years, we've worked with literally tens of thousands of small, medium, often actually even micro-sized enterprises, and we've worked with over 1,200 trade support institutions, which are often be called business support organizations or trade promotion organizations across 50 different countries in Latin America, the Caribbean, Africa, Middle East, and Asia. And so our sectors of focus is definitely agricultural products as being a very important sector, given the amount of product in these areas, whether it be fresh fruit and vegetables or processed food. Canada is a tremendous importer of products, so this presents an interesting opportunities for small, medium enterprise in developing countries to see Canada as a potential market for their products. But we also have facilitated trade in the areas of apparel, textiles, footwear, fashion accessories, home decor, and more in the area of services sectors, the information and communications technologies as an example. The first one is really around information. And so this is where we've done various market entry research. We've worked with companies to help them with their strategies on being able to export to the Canadian market. It's actually often done in collaboration with some MBA schools here in Canada. We also do a lot of information seminars. So obviously in the last year and a half, it's been a lot of webinars, but we've actually done webinars for years. And it's oftentimes it's very focused on things like the Safe Food for Canadians Act, or requirements for exporting your goods, the standards, the qualities that are necessary to be able to meet the Canadian market standards. The second bucket, if you will, of services is really around advice. And so this is where we have brought many exporters on market familiarization tours, where we show them the retail landscape in a major city like Toronto or Montreal or even Vancouver, where we're showing them, supermarkets and the different categories that exist, whether it be, a lower, more bargain oriented retail chain, or maybe a higher end niche products, and certainly have also shown ethnic market areas as well. So that might be an advantage for certain products coming from African countries. Product adaptation and development is another key area. So helping exporters understand not just the fact, how the product should look, but also helping them with packaging, labeling. Of course, in Canada, we're a metric system. We're bilingual, French and English, and so helping them to understand some of the things that are needed from a packaging perspective. We help with product promotion. Our website, tfocanada.ca, is an opportunity for African farmers to actually, their companies to display and to register on our website and have access to all of this information that I'm actually talking about this morning. And so we do a lot there. And we work very closely with, obviously, the small, medium enterprise and trade support institutions in building their capacity, helping them, in the case of the trade support institutions, helping them so that they can help the SMEs themselves on accessing the Canadian market. So it's really a training of trainer models, where we're showing them all that they need to know to help support SMEs on putting together a marketing strategy, an exporting strategy, to be able to target certain areas of the Canadian marketplace. The third area of our services, if I'm to categorize it, is really around contact. And so we've worked in many projects over the years where, this is kind of, I always say this is where the rubber meets the road, where we're actually helping to set up and facilitate business-to-business meetings between exporters and importers. And this is often done through exporter trade missions, so bringing the exporters to Canada to various shows like the Grocery Innovation Canada Show, the Canadian Produce Marketing Association annual show, as well as the CL Canada Show, which is, of course, everybody knows as being the large international show that's largely focused on processed food. And so that's one way. We also do buyer missions where we've actually brought the importers themselves to meet the exporters in their country, maybe visit their facilities and have more in-depth conversations that way. And of course, over the last year and a half, we've done more and more of the virtual kind of activities, helping to facilitate virtual missions and participating in virtual trade events as well. So that's kind of a brief synopsis of the types of services that we have available for African farmers today. If I look at the last, 5-6 years, we've worked specifically in countries like Tunisia, Morocco, Ghana, Egypt, Burkina Faso, and Senegal. And it's been very focused on a lot of the types of services that I just described, where we're helping, working in collaboration with the trade support institutions, helping to build their capacity, and then of course helping with the selection of small medium enterprises to be able to come on trade missions to Canada. We've had some successes, certainly through these activities over the last few years, generating sales in the 6 and 7 figures. I have to put a qualifier there because we track export sales during the duration of the project, and of course our hope is that once the project is over, that business linkages that have been established continue, and so that way there's much more sales happening far beyond the end of a project. But certainly when I look at these countries, we've worked in Tunisia, there's been certainly olive oil, dates, processed foods in those areas has been a key area. Egypt has done a great work in some of its processed food as well. Burkina Faso and Senegal has been centered a lot on aromatherapy and in essential oils, and looking at things like shea butter as a potential export product for the Canadian marketplace as well. If I'm to look at other things that we've done, specifically in Africa, we had a project going back just a couple of years ago now. It was actually a partnership with the International Trade Center based out of Geneva, Switzerland. And this is their She Trades project. This one actually was called She Trades Commonwealth because it was done thanks to the support of the United Kingdom, actually. And so we did training and capacity building in 4 countries, being Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, and Bangladesh was the 4th. But when I look at the 3 countries themselves, we trained over 800 women-led, women-owned small businesses in Ghana, Nigeria, and Kenya. We coached, so this is where we actually helped them to develop an export plan. So not just selling their products to Canada, but actually to other markets that might be attractive to them. And so we coached over 550, and we actually identified out of the 550, just over 50 of them is what we deemed to be export ready. In other words, that they were export ready and that Canada was going to be a good target for their exports. And so that's, I guess, a bit of an example of some of the recent work that we've done on the African continent. And of course, we do have some ongoing initiatives happening currently as well. while we are seeing progress, there's much more that can be done. And so it's interesting when I look at some trade statistics, covering a period of 2001 to 2018. I know it's a long time period, but Canada more than tripled its exports to Africa from $1 billion in 2001 to $3.3 billion in 2018. But that being said, Canada actually has captured less than 1% of the additional global exports to Africa that were realized in this period. So there's other countries that are certainly taking advantage of the burgeoning market that the African continent is providing. What's interesting, though, is some of our research, we see that Canada has performed particularly well in niche markets where Canada is a global leader. And so, for example, there's been above expected levels of strong, sustained sales in wheat to countries like Algeria, Morocco, and Ghana. If I look on the import side, so Canadian imports of agri-foods from Africa, just in the past 5 years, Canada's imports from Africa have been growing faster than its imports from other parts of the world. Now, this could be because, there's a certain level of saturation that's happened with some of the markets, or it could be other things that are happening, perhaps some of our collective efforts and continuing to promote trade between Canada and continental Africa. Canada's African imports in the agricultural sector has been growing at a compound annual growth rate of 9% from 2016 to 2020. And its imports from other countries in the industry only grew at 2%. So again, my interpretation is that, because we're starting at a fairly low point, there's nothing but great opportunities to grow and to be able to, expand on what's been happening over the last several years. There's a lack of knowledge between African nations and lack of knowledge of Canada as an import market and what products are that might be viable and have success in Canada. But I think it's also a lack of knowledge and perhaps a risk aversion from the Canadian buyers. We certainly see, when we look at agricultural products, a lot of Canada's imports come from the Americas, right? Like a lot, there's perhaps because of proximity, similar time zones, and certainly when you look at the United States as an example, similar culture, language, etc. But I think, overall, there's probably, generally speaking, just a lack of knowledge of what the potentials are. So events such as this one hopefully help to break down some of those information gaps so that we can certainly talk about, the potential that exists. One of the things that what I always find interesting, so I've traveled to a number of African countries, and it seems like whenever I go and I have my TFO Canada banner, people, whether they be the trade support institutions, the business associations, or even the SMEs themselves, they've all heard about the United States African Growth and Opportunity Act, otherwise known as AGOA. On the other hand, very few seem to know much about Canada's Market Access Initiative for Least Developed Countries. It just doesn't resonate. And even though it's been in existence actually since 2003, what I found interesting on a recent in the context of COVID, of course, it was in early 2020, I was in Mozambique and I was doing an Exporting to Canada seminar to a group of interested exporters. And the introduction that was given was that part of what I was going to be talking about were some of the tariff advantages or trade benefits that Canada has to offer. And the person that was introducing me and the topic actually talked about how Canada's Market Access Initiative, it's kind of like AGOA. So even that, instead of just saying what it was, which of course the Market Access Initiative, its objective is to promote economic growth in least developed countries. It provides duty-free, quota-free entry into the Canadian market for products exported from least developed countries. Of course, there's a few exceptions around agricultural products around some poultry, dairy, egg products, for example. But what I find interesting is when you look at, the number of least developed countries that there are in the world, about 70% are actually in Africa. And so that presents an opportunity to really promote the program to both importers and exporters, talk about the benefits, and of course, the kind of technical assistance that TFO Canada can provide should hopefully build the capacity and help to bridge that gap a little bit. Continue to encourage participation at trade shows themselves, whether they be virtual in today's context. In 2022, I understand that CL Canada in Montreal is going to be in April, and they're planning to have an in-person event once again. So fingers crossed that we'll all be able to gather in Montreal. And so those are, certainly thoughts around what can be done. Certainly when I think about, the work that TFO Canada does, we have some funded projects thanks to the support of the Canadian government through Global Affairs Canada. One in particular is called Women in Trade for Inclusive and Sustainable Growth. And we're working with some 14 countries in Africa under this project. And there's a number of these countries that are actually, we're targeting the agricultural sector, agri-food, to as potentials to be able to export to Canada and to other markets as well. And so what are we doing? We're working, again, with the trade support institutions, helping to, expand and to support them in their information and knowledge about the Canadian marketplace so that they can also help to support not just SMEs, but in particular with a focus on women-led SMEs. Because, one of the things that TFO Canada does, because we are, a mission-driven organization, for us, it's not just about promoting trade. We want to help to promote, good trade that will support decent jobs. We're very much aligned to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And we're also very focused on helping to support women entrepreneurs in particular, because we recognize that there are certain obstacles for women-led enterprise that we can hopefully help to support so that they're able to participate in international markets as well. And so those are some thoughts and ideas. I think, again, a focused attention, bringing, opportunities and events to both buyers and sellers will help to, over time, bridge that gap and to kind of increase two-way trade between Canada and several African countries as well. SMEs themselves, the small holder farmers, cooperatives, etc., that we would invite you to come register on our website. It's free of charge. It's actually covered under through donor support that we've received. And so register on our website, tfocanada.ca, and there you'll have access to a lot of the information that I've described. We help to promote trade events that are happening in your respective countries, whether they be here in Canada or abroad. And certainly, a lot of the webinars or other information sessions that we host, we promote those as well. For the exporters, what's interesting is once you've registered on our website, and let's say you have 1 year of exporting experience, you can actually, build your company's profile, put on some pictures of the products that you're looking to sell, put together a price list if you want. And so you can think of this part of our website as kind of your online store. And what we do is we promote the export offers to the importers that are in our database. So think of it as kind of a online virtual B2B matchmaking. And so lots happening. And certainly, as we look towards the future, we're going to increase and continue to do more in terms of offering digital tools and online tools for exporters. But we're also going to be doing more in terms of supporting them so that we're helping the exporters build their online presence leverage social media, and also how to, as part of an exporting strategy, how can we look at some of the e-commerce platforms that exist? So again, so that we're trying to, I guess, shorten the distance between Canada and Africa. While it is true that the level of trade that I've talked about earlier has been quite low, especially when we compare to other nations, I always see this as an opportunity. And so really, in some of the work that we want to do is we want to find those opportunities, those niche markets, because there's certainly, Canada as a country, when we look at importing food and agricultural products, it's such a diverse market. And so there's many, many different tastes. And so there's great opportunities, I think, for many specialized and different products coming from Africa into the Canadian market. And so, our commitment is to continue to support and to work closely with our partners to help grow trade between the countries. And so, because our, if you will, our currency is not just about export sales. It's about export sales that creates more economic prosperity in the countries we're working. And of course, when there's more economic prosperity, more sales, it's creating more jobs for people, and that has the knock-on effect of just having greater development outcomes at the end of the day.